Today's goal is being able to read and write mixed numbers as decimals. If you look at this place value chart, it's relating money to our different place values. So like we talked about when we discussed decimals before, after each whole number, there's always an imaginary decimal behind that whole number. So if you look at the number 100, on this place value chart, they have that decimal put in for you. So as a whole number, we would write 100 just as 100 and know that there would be a decimal after that whole number. If we wrote 100 as a fraction, we would write it as 100 over 1, as you see here. And then they show you how you would write it as a decimal using money, because if you were to have a $100 bill, you would write that amount like you see here. The same goes for 10. 10 wholes, you have that imaginary decimal after the 10. The fraction is 10 over 1, and if you were to write it as a decimal or write it as a money value, you would write it like this. 1 whole, imaginary decimal, 1 over 1 is equal to 1 whole, and here's how you would write it as a money amount. The first place value after the decimal is the tenths spot. Remember our saying, boom, Tom heard thunder. So that T for Tom is the tenth spot. This is how you would write 1/10 as a decimal. We discussed how 1 dime is equal to 1/10 of a dollar, and we would write that money amount like this, 10 cents. Next place value is hundredths. You would write 1 100ths as a decimal with a 0 before the 1 after the decimal. 1 100ths would be written like this as a fraction, and we discussed how 1 penny is 1 100th of a dollar. You would write that money amount like this. We see a pattern with this place value chart. Here's our decimal, and as we get larger, as the place values get larger, we are actually multiplying by 10 to each place value. So 1 times 10 would be 10. 10 times 10 would be 100. If you took 100 times 10, it would take you to the next place value, which would be thousands. If we look to the right of the decimal, though, to the right of the decimal, we are getting smaller. So when we go from tenths to hundredths, our numbers are getting smaller. We're dividing by 10. If you were to divide the hundredths place value by 10, you would get to the next place value, which would be the thousandths, and then the 10,000ths and the 100,000ths, and so on. Now that we have refreshed the different place values on the number line and discussed those place values, we're going to practice writing mixed numbers as decimals. So I'd like you to get out your workbooks and turn to page 370. When you get to page 370, I want you to take a look at number 3. The directions for number 3 say read and write each mixed number as a decimal. And number 3, the mixed number they give you is 3 1/10. When we say this mixed number, 3 1/10, we know that the 3 is our whole number, 3. It's in the ones place value. 3 and, that word and tells us that we need to put a decimal. And then 1/10. The 1 has to be in the tenths position, or the tenths place value. Boom, Tom heard thunder. The T for Tom is the tenths position, or place value. So that's number 3. Go ahead and write that down. And now let's take a look at number 7. The directions for that set of 4 problems says read and write each decimal as a mixed number. So it's going the opposite way. It gives you a decimal. Well, we would say this decimal as 12 8/10. And if we want to write that as a mixed number, 12 would be our whole number and 8/10. So that's how we would write that as a mixed number. Go ahead and finish the rest of the problems on this page. So I want you to do 3 through 22 and check these problems with your teacher when you're finished.